There have been plenty of times in show business where drugs have interfered in a talented figure's life. John Belushi, Chris Farley, and Whitney Houston were three powerful entertainers in their prime, but all three eventually lost a continuing battle to drugs, which in turn ended their life. Comedian Charlie Barnett would also suffer the same fate after losing a spot on Saturday Night Live to Eddie Murphy and becoming Dave Chappelle's mentor. Barnett clearly had all the talent in the world and had worked with some of the best. Unfortunately, Charlie Barnett's rise to fame would be short-lived after his addiction took him in the opposite direction. Born in 1954 in Bluefield, West Virginia, Barnett didn't have the easiest childhood growing up. His mother was an alcoholic and his father was mentally ill. Barnett lived with his grandmother until he was 11, then headed to Boston. Barnett didn't put much attention on school, which led him to drop out and move to Boston to meet his mother for the first time and live with her. Barnett admits he was pretty hostile at that age. Barnett's mother kicked him out just a year later. In regards to his time in Boston, Barnett can only recall reform schools that taught him how to fight and stay alive. After leaving his mother's place, Barnett moved to New York. Barnett soon found his way in Greenwich Village and started performing in Washington Square Park. Some considered it ground zero for performing arts. Poets, jugglers, musicians, and comedians played to an audience of sometimes hundreds outside. Behind a newspaper kiosk located on 6th Avenue and 3rd is where Barnett would often set up a space, begin yelling, and start attracting a crowd. "Showtime! Showtime!" Barnett would call out to everyone. Barnett impersonated winos, junkies. He interacted with the crowd and played off of them. One day, a William Morris agent named Greg Mullins saw Charlie performing for a crowd of about 300. He booked him to do comedy clubs around the country. Mullins also got Barnett an audition for Saturday Night Live during a time where the show was completely overhauling their cast. Barnett's talents took him to the final auditions. Producers wanted him. However, dropping out of school and not being able to read well was enough to prevent Barnett from attending the reading. Barnett admitted that he was scared. "Man, I was supposed to be where Eddie Murphy is now. I was picked for Saturday Night Live." Barnett also confesses that he became jealous of Murphy once he got the part. "I couldn't watch Saturday Night Live. I would change the channel. I couldn't stand to see Eddie Murphy's articles." As Barnett's career started to gain traction, he let go of his previous animosities. At the end of the day, he knew that there was room for both of them in Hollywood. "Now that I'm making it, I watch Saturday Night Live every Saturday." Not discouraged from his dream, Barnett continued to perform stand-up. Producers of the film DC Cab saw Barnett performing on a garbage can rim on a street corner and found it hypnotizing. As a result, Barnett made his film debut in the 1983 film DC Cab as Tyrone Baywater, a streetwise cab driver. According to critics, Barnett stole the show. Barnett had also signed a 3-picture deal with Universal, so his star was certainly rising. The director of DC Cab, Joel Schumacher, said that he saw a shyness and innocence in Charlie, which is part of why he cast him. A lot of people became interested in Charlie and started giving him all kinds of offers. Schumacher believes this confused him and brought him even more problems. Schumacher wonders if Charlie would have been better off leaving him in the park, because at least he knew the turf. From DC Cab, Barnett scored a recurring guest role on Miami Vice. The character was Noogie, a police snitch. Barnett played the character from 1984 to 1987. Barnett had a guest role in the police drama T.J. Hooker. He also appeared in the films My Man Adam in 1985 and Nobody's Fool in 1986. Success got the best of Charlie. After performing stand-up for years and finally appearing in television and movies, Barnett began to show signs of drug abuse. The people around him began to take notice. Despite missing out on several opportunities due to his growing drug habit, stand-up comedy was still Barnett's supreme skill. The first time he saw Charlie, Dave Chappelle told his former manager, "Man, I'm never gonna be funny as that guy." At one point, Barnett took a teenage Chappelle under his wing. Barnett encouraged Chappelle to further refine his skills by performing at the fountain outside. Oftentimes, Chappelle would perform a 5-minute set before Barnett. "When I first got to New York, I met Charlie. That was another thing that kind of advanced me, skill-wise. Just exponentially. Charlie taught me how to be fearless working outside, man. I would do stand-up outside and gather a crowd or pick up someone else's crowd that was just finishing up. But I was learning from the best guy who was doing it." Between 1988 and 1992, Barnett didn't make an appearance in television or film. In '93, Barnett got another opportunity most comedians would kill for. He did a set on Def Comedy Jam. Unfortunately, the set was not broadcast on TV, instead featured on a DVD extra of Def Comedy Jam called Too Raw for TV. Unfortunately, Barnett's drug habit would get the best of him and negatively affect his career. Drugs eventually got the best of Barnett. In the mid-90s, Barnett caught HIV from his use of heroin and died from AIDS complication on March 16, 1996 at the age of 41. Charlie's last role was in the 1996 film They Bite. The film was released less than 3 weeks after his death. Barnett's story is so captivating, Hollywood had plans of turning his life story into a movie. According to Vulture, Universal Pictures greenlit King of the Park, a biopic based on the life of Charlie Barnett, produced by Brian Grazer and Ron Howard. Executives had picked Dave Chappelle to star as Barnett. However, this was back in the early 2000s before Chappelle left Hollywood back in 2005. When Chappelle quit his show, plans for the film halted. If Barnett were alive today, he'd be 66, and we could only wonder where his career would have taken him if other distractions didn't get in the way. Barnett remains a legend in his own right, having connections to two of the biggest comedians working today. Barnett's reputation has us wishing we were in Washington Square back in the 80s while he was gathering a crowd of his own, yelling, "Showtime! Showtime!"